It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. Tell you what, I don't know where Larry Loftis finds these ladies because they're spies and they're undercover, but he finds them, and he found us another one. The new book is The Princess Spy, now a New York Times bestseller and already a New York Times bestseller. We had Larry with us with Codename Lisa, the true story of the woman who became World War II's most highly decorated spy. We also had him for Into the Lion's Mouth, the story of Dusko Popoff, World War II spy. Larry, how do you keep finding these spies?
Well, I just have to keep digging, but usually a lot of times if I do enough research, there'll be a nugget, there'll be a hint, there'll be something that leads me one to the next.
You see, I wondered about that. By the way, our conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. I would guess that as you're going down the labyrinth of stories, that you find a thread that you can pull on, and it'll unravel something that's very, very fascinating.
Well, what usually happens, and this is probably sad to say, I want to write only nonfiction thrillers, and that's hard to do because even most spies didn't do that many exciting things. Typically they did one thing, and that's not enough to make a thriller. So most of my entrees into potential targets don't pan out, and so I have to toss them. But if I keep digging, I eventually find the needle in the haystack where I find someone that did a lot of things, and there's a lot of action. So then I just keep charging forward. And
you found another one. Introduce us to Eileen Griffith. The story is The Princess Spy, the true story of World War II spy Eileen Griffith, Countess of Romanonis. And I might have mispronounced a whole bunch in there.
No, that was fine. She was a small-town girl, an American that grew up in Pearl River, New York, just a little small hamlet outside of Manhattan. And she was beautiful. She was 5'9". She was a model. When she graduated from college, she actually wanted to get into the war. Her brothers were in the war. But she's only 22. I mean, a young lady. So she takes a job in Manhattan modeling, but really wants to get in the war. And then she has this serendipitous dinner date. And her blind date happened to be a guy that worked for the OSS, which is our forerunner of the CAA. Of course, she doesn't know that. And he's asking, oh, do you want to be a famous model? No, I want to get into the war. Oh, really? Well, why? So he basically interviews her over dinner. And says, well, if you meet it, if you hear from a guy named Mr. Tomlinson, you'll know what it's about. Can't make any promises, but he might be able to help you get in the war. Well, of course, she gets this call 2 weeks later, and that guy was another OSS guy, and she's recruited, and they send her off to the farm, which is where they train these folks. It's 100 acres outside of D.C., and so she learned how to use all the weapons and the pistols and the rifles and machine guns, the Tommy gun. She learned how to knife fight. She learned how to make a knife out of a newspaper. In fact, she was trained by, if you remember from Into the Lion's Mouth, William Fairbairn, the father of hand-to-hand combat and the creator of the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife. That's the guy that trained Popoff, Dusko, Popoff,
Sure.
who was Fleming's inspiration for Bond. Same guy trained her. We knew about this guy. The Americans knew about this guy, and he was so good. So the British loaned him to us, and so that's who trained Eileen.
The amazing thing to me about this part of the story is maybe Eileen didn't know what she was getting into, but the guy that recruited her, he didn't know what he was getting. He was getting someone who had an enormous amount of talent that nobody knew about, not even her.
Yeah, it's spies are a special breed, and the one thing they have to do is they have to be able to live with two identities, or sometimes more than two. And, he's using his judgment, but he wants someone that's sophisticated, that's articulate, that can blend in, that can be trained, and that's motivated. And she was all of those things. In fact, she was essentially the female, Popoff was the inspiration for Bond. She was the female version of James Bond, trained by the same guy that trained Popoff, spoke Spanish fluently, had a working knowledge of French. She was very articulate. Sophisticated, so they would send her. She was trained as a coder, and she went to Madrid as a coder to code and decode incoming messages out of the Madrid office. And then they realized when she was there about a year, hey, she's talented. Let's get her out in the field. So they send her out as a field agent, which she would do at night and on weekends. And so she would go to diplomat parties and bullfights and flamenco parties and German restaurants to find out more to find out who the German collaborators are, and eventually they would try to chase and find some of the Nazi money that was being funneled through Spain in a project called Safe Haven. So, yeah, fascinating stuff.
So Frank Ryan is the guy's name, and he recognizes what he has here in Aileen Griffith, and he sends her off to Spain, where they have a desperate need for someone who can do what she can do. Another part of the story that fascinates me is how seamlessly she was able to incorporate, almost from the moment she got there, incorporate herself into Spanish society, and how she was pursued by famous people right from the very start.
Yeah, she was, she was trained to be a spy, so she was pretty smooth going in, but her personality, she just had an engaging personality, very sanguine, and so she could slip in and just talk to people in an unassuming way, but she's beautiful and striking. So, yeah, there were actually, and this is sort of the undercurrent throughout the book, is there's all these romance parts, because she's doing espionage during the day. She's coding during the day. She's going out during the night. And a famous bullfighter, Juanito Belmonte, falls in love with her, is sending her chocolates and flowers and taking her out to dinner all the time. And then an OSS guy, an operative that she had trained with at the farm, he fell in love with her. Then there's a third guy, the American consul, Barnaby Conrad, who actually bailed her out of jail. She had been arrested. She was traveling on an assignment. She was arrested and thrown in jail in Malaga. And so he's the one that's called to bail her out. So he's smitten by her. Mm-hmm. And then the man she eventually falls in love with and marries, Luis Figueroa, who at the time was the Count of Quintanilla. It's the title that he has, and he becomes the Count of Romanones. She falls in love with him, and they eventually get married. But all of those romance things are happening while she's an active spy.
Yeah, in fact...
Luis, she's burning the candle at both ends.
Luis, when he found out, when she told him later in their relationship what she had been doing, he just laughed at it. He didn't believe it.
Yeah, who could believe it? She's a model. She's a professional model with a great personality and outgoing, and that's not what you really think of in terms of a spy. Yeah. And so he didn't believe her, and she said, well, okay, it's off my chest. I've told him, I've admitted it. So, she'd done her part in telling him, because they were about to get married. And she felt like, I have to tell him what I did.
Yeah. The way this transitions from a spy story into a love story is pretty amazing. And that's also something that's amazing about this book. And again, we're talking with Larry Loftis. The book is The Princess Spy. And it's an amazing story about a World War II spy named Aileen Griffith, is that she really immersed herself in a world that she didn't expect that she would become so involved in, and that is bullfighting, which is a religion in Spain. And she actually even tried it one night herself and got thrown by a bull.
Yeah, she like most Americans, we don't really understand what bullfighting is about. It seems kind of gory, and so she wasn't a fan, but she knew that was the pastime. In World War II, it's not even soccer yet there. So it was bullfighting and flamenco were the two things that every Spaniard on every level of society did. So she knew, for purposes of espionage, she was going to have to go to bullfights. And in fact, in one of them, a few rows in front of her is none other than Walter Schellenberg, who was basically Hitler's spy master. He was the SD foreign intelligence guy for the Nazis, and he's there. So it was just one place that she knew that those, her counterparts from the German side would be there. And remember, Popov was there too. Popov was at this famous bull ring. And he knew that the Gestapo were all over the place. And if you remember from that story, he punched a guy out and had to get out quickly because he knew the Gestapo would be all over the place. So, yeah, the bullfighting is a place where that's where the action is going on and where you need to go if you're going to meet and see people.
Aileen Griffith's story is so fascinating. And she actually, I think, became fascinated with herself later because she came out with a series of books in which she wrote about her adventures. Some of the adventures she wrote about maybe a little bit on the edge of whether they were actually things that happened or not. You tell us all about that in the book. Man, Larry, I wish we could go on and on and on about this, but we're running out of time here this morning. People want to know more about The Princess Spy, which is now a New York Times bestseller, and it's just out. What do they need to do? I know you've got a great website.
Well, they can. I mean, the book can be picked up anywhere books are sold, and if they want to read a little more, they can on my website LarryLoftis.com. They can read about it. In fact, I was on the Today Show, so I posted a little clip if they want to see that. Kerry Sanders from NBC interviewed me, so they can get a little background if they want to check out a little more.
It's fantastic stuff. It is called The Princess Spy, the true story of World War II spy Aileen Griffith, Countess of Romanonis. And he is Larry Loftis. Next time out, don't forget me, okay, Larry?
Hey, you're going to be in the movie. We've got a spot for you.
Have a wonderful day today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Bye now.
Bye now.
And there is Larry Loftis here in the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160.